So today we celebrate the 101st birthday of the United Church of Canada. So, happy birthday. I hope there's cake. Oh, we have leftovers. That'll do. That's even better. That's more United Churchy anyway. So here's a question for you. When did the United Church of Canada come into being, and where did that happen? And I just realized I shouldn't have told you it's 101st birthday because that's a bit of a clue. 1925. And where? Toronto. Actually, I want to give two answers to the question, of course. If you simply went to Google or Mary Ellen, you would be told that, of course, the United Church of Canada came into being on June 10th, 1925, at a worship service held at Mutual Street Arena in Toronto. And that is, of course, true. And believe it or not, there are women in that picture. I think they're all white, though, at least when I scan the picture. But if you know the history, there's another answer to the question. Because the United Church of Canada did not spring into life from a vacuum. The seeds of the United Church were planted decades earlier, and those seeds were planted not in a packed arena in Toronto, but in small rural churches like this one. This particular church is near Limerick, Saskatchewan, but I just chose it at random. The history is about many, many small rural churches, many of them in the west, but some in the east as well. You have to remember that back in Canada's pioneering days, many immigrants, including my family, my father's family, took up homesteads in the prairies. They grew crops, they raised cattle. And because transportation was so difficult, farms had to be located close to towns, which meant that there were a lot of towns, a lot of really little towns. The population of Limerick, Saskatchewan today is 115 people. Not 115,000, 115 people. I assume they change the sign every time a cat gives birth. But of course, Protestant denominations all wanted to have congregations in every single town. Well, clearly that was impossible. It'd be crazy for a town of 115 people to have an Anglican church, a Lutheran church, a Methodist church, a Presbyterian church, as well as a Roman Catholic church and Orthodox church. And that's only the list for Christians. This led to what has been called the Church Union Movement, a movement among some Canadian Protestant denominations based on the ideas that if churches work together, we would better be resourced to actually do the work of the church. Now, today that might sound like an obvious idea, but in those days that was not very automatic. It was really a decision that doing the work of the church was more important than preserving denominational independence. And in those days, and even today, denominations are actually fairly closely tied to country of origin, in Canada anyway. So the idea of working with those people in order to make the church stronger was nothing like a slam dunk. It took decades, in fact, to come together. The union also happened because some people had a vision of a singular Protestant church in Canada, perhaps to better compete with the singular Roman Catholic Church in Canada. And all of those very practical ideas led over time to the creation of the United Church of Canada in 1925. The union brought together the Methodists, Congregationalists, and about 2/3 of the Presbyterian congregations in Canada, and other denominations have joined since then. But the union spirit, which was the driver for this, continues today, in fact. The spirit that says that doing the work of the church is more important than carrying and preserving the identities we carry from our past. That's union spirit that says the present is more important than the past. The spirit that affirms that the word church is actually a verb. The churches need to engage in their own time, in their own place, in their own way. When congregations amalgamate, which is part of our own history, we always hope that the amalgamation is not simply a survival technique, that instead the bringing together of people and resources creates a new church that's better able to do the work of the church. And the creation of the United Church of Canada was like that, just at a denominational level. The United Church of Canada was created to be an active church. And the idea of being an active church is actually in our creeds. Let me show you, because we never talk about this. The word creed, as I mentioned last week, comes from the Latin credo, which means I believe. And ancient creeds are simply that, statements of beliefs. I mean, consider the Apostles' Creed, for example. It was based on the old Roman creed from the 2nd century, but was adapted and reached its final form around the 8th century. But consider the structure of the creed. So I'm going to put up something I know you can't read. But the Apostles' Creed from the 8th century, there's essentially 3 paragraphs, one about God, Jesus, the Spirit. Right? The God one is, I believe in God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. The Jesus one is the longest, of course. But it's only 3 paragraphs. It says, I believe in God, and then describes that a little bit. I believe in Jesus, describes that a little bit. I believe in the Spirit. So the Apostles' Creed only speaks to what the speaker believes and only talks about God, Jesus, and Spirit. Well, what about the creeds from the United Church? We have 4 creeds, actually. One was finalized in 1925, one in 1940, one in 1968, and then which was called a new creed, and never call anything a new something because the language is terrible, which has been updated twice, in fact. In 1980, the creed was changed to use gender-inclusive language, not only for God, but for the people. And in 1994, it was changed to include a statement about environmental stewardship, with the addition of the line, to live with respect in creation. And that's the creed we use during worship here. So if you look at the structure of the new creed, I know you can't read that. There is a poster on the wall. But I want to highlight the structure because the first little block of text there is what we believe. The belief statements about, of course, God, Jesus, and the Spirit. But the middle piece, which is the longest piece, is what we actually do. It includes statements about how we behave. It includes statements of how we should be as a community. It includes statements about hope. And it declares clearly, the whole creed declares clearly, what is the essential motto of the United Church of Canada, that we are not alone. So the new creed goes beyond simply saying what we believe, although it has that. It includes how we are to be church together. The new creed includes a call to action. To quote from the middle section, we are called to be the church, to celebrate God's presence, to live with respect in creation, to love and serve others, to seek justice and resist evil, to proclaim Jesus crucified and risen, our judge and our hope. So that is not only about beliefs, it is about our identity, and it suggests in broad strokes what we are to do as a church. And this idea of being a church that acts and engages in society is not just empty words. So I wanted to share a historical story from the United Church, and I wanted to pick a story you may not have heard before. So my apologies if you know this story. But the story starts at the Archambault Penitentiary in Quebec. Anyone know this story? On July 25th, 1982, 2 inmates tried to leave the facility, which is discouraged. In the process, they killed 3 guards, and when the inmates could not get out, they killed themselves. A widespread riot ensued. In the process of restoring order, many regulations were broken by prison staff, and prisoner abuse and torture happened. After order had been established, prisoner abuse considered for some time as a form of retaliation for the death of the guards. Believe it or not, the United Church received a letter requesting help. Unbelievable, right? They received an anguished plea from the families of the prisoners, which actually got dealt with at General Council in 1982. The upshot of which was our moderator visited the Archambault prison twice, on September 9th and September 30th of 1982, to support the families and to check on the allegations and grievances. The moderator joined the call for a formal inquiry into the situation at Archambault, which was carried out. The moderator met with penitentiary chaplains and also with families of prisoners. At one meeting with families, a wife actually left the hall in tears because she was comforted and grateful that a national church body had actually listened and had responded with an act of compassion. That's the church in action. Our moderator took the words we read from Matthew, "I was in prison and you visited me," literally. Our moderator took the creeds of the new creed seriously too, to seek justice and resist evil, accepting the call to action embedded in our new creed. Because our creed and our faith calls us to act, even beyond the walls of the church. This also lives well into the sentiment, I can't give the United Church credit for this, it goes back to St. Augustine, that without God, we cannot, and without us, God will not. It has always been understood within the United Church that we are active participants in our own salvation, and that faith leads to action. Action, of course, can take many forms. Engaging with inmates' families at Archambault was, let's say, a fairly direct way to engage. Other times, engagement can look very different. In our society today that tries to isolate and shun people, providing an open space of welcome is an action in itself. The United Church has welcomed widely for a long time, which is why I entitled this reflection, Still Setting the Table. Because we keep setting out new place settings to welcome others into our table of belonging. We still strive, not perfectly, to welcome everyone to our table. In honor of our 100th anniversary last year, the United Church imagined this in a new way. You're probably all familiar with this. Last Supper from Da Vinci. That table, of course, only included white men, just saying. But in 2025, in honor of our 100th anniversary, the United Church of Canada commissioned a new image that looks more like that. It is loosely based on the Last Supper, but the table is not full of white men. And the project is not just that image. It's a project called A Place at the Table that includes interactive videos and stories. And the figures at the table are called disciples. Nobody at the table is Jesus. Nobody at the table is Judas. They are all disciples, just as we are all disciples. And I want to share some of the disciple videos with you now so you can hear in their own words what they care about, why they care about the United Church, and their vision for a future. And if you care more than I'm going to show you, if you go to just Google A Place at the Table, each one of the disciples has their own story in video form. But I'm not going to show them all, don't worry. But I want to share a few videos from some of the disciples.
I believe that we are all a part of bold belonging. And in our identity as disciples, I hope that we will embrace whatever that means for each of us, in whatever ways we define spirituality, in whatever ways we come to understand and relate to Creator, to creation, to all that is bigger than each of us, yet which we're all a part of. And in that universal space that we are all connected, we're all part of this energy, this awe and wonder that draws us together, that brings us into relationship, beckoning us to go deeper, beckoning us to get to know one another, to really love each other, and to trust what it means to love our neighbor with no exceptions. And I hope that people will feel that there is an invitation to explore their own spiritual journey that will take them deeper, and to know that if they choose to look at, to explore the United Church, that they will find themselves on a journey with fellow seekers who are wondering who they are, that they will find ways to express themselves, to have the freedom to explore what prayer means for them, what spiritual practices are all about, and that there's no one way or no right way, but whatever way it is, to trust that God is with them and that we are never alone.
To have a place at the table, and not just the table of the church, but the table beside Jesus, it's really just powerful for people who have been marginalized for various reasons. It's like there's plenty of places where I can't be, but I know that Jesus would welcome the people who were on the outsides, on the margins, and not only welcome them, but have deep theological conversations, not just a kind word and a smile, but a truly vested interest in what their life experience is, what their beliefs and fears and dreams are, and to be a disciple or a leader in the United Church of Canada as a neurodiverse person, I feel like, yeah, sometimes the expectation for people with autism is that they're just kind of there being shuttled around. Uh, but I want to be active participant and making the leadership decisions, making choices, being an agent in my own life.
I think about what is happening right now in the world, and in particular in Canada. In my ministry, come across so many people who are lonely and who are looking for a sense of connection and belonging and community. And I think churches are one of the few places where you can just walk in. You don't have to fill out any membership form. You don't have to give them your credit card number for some kind of membership fee. You don't have to explain your full story. You can just come and sit and receive an experience. And if you feel called, if you feel that pull, then there's a way for you to get involved in the community and to connect with other people who want to love their neighbor.
Just one more.
The role that the church plays in the broader Canadian tapestry now, I think, is one still of social justice advocacy and getting people to understand and be advocates for change, for justice, for ensuring that people who are marginalized have a place in our society. And that may be advocating for climate change. It may be advocating for things like basic income. And then it certainly is about advocating for people whose voices are not heard often, or who have traditionally been marginalized in terms of their sexual orientation.
So I just want to share a handful of those disciple stories. And each one at the table represents or are a member of a group that traditionally we have excluded from our table. And I thought about it, kind of explaining it more, and then I thought, no, they're people. They can speak for themselves. I don't have to tell you, because they don't define their identities by that group anyway. They're disciples. That's it. And since I'm on a roll, I do want to share one more video. You're going to think because I was on a retreat, I didn't have time to write a sermon, and you're probably right. But our moderator recently released a video as well, and it touches on our anniversary, and it's also an invitation to embrace Pride this year. Oh, because I forget if she mentions this, but at General Council this year, we actually had a motion and a formal apology to the queer community for historical events. So here's her summary.
Friends in Christ, as we gather this Pride season, we do so with honesty, humility, and hope. In 2025, the United Church of Canada offered an apology to 2S and LGBTQIA+ people and communities. An apology that named real harm done through words and actions, through silence and delay, through systems that failed to protect, affirm, and cherish God's beloved people. That apology did not erase the past, nor did it arrive at the same place in the journey for everyone. Some received it with relief, some with grief, some with caution, and for some it came far too late. Today we honor the full truth of those stories, the stories of heartbreak, fear, and exclusion, and also the stories of courage, solidarity, love, and joy. We remember those who were pushed away from the church, and we lift up those who stayed and worked, often at great personal cost, to bend the church closer to justice. Pride is not only celebration, it is remembrance, it is resistance. It is a witness to the fierce holiness of people who refuse to believe that who they are was a mistake. We affirm again and without hesitation every gender identity, every sexual orientation, every expression of self rooted in love and authenticity is a divine gift. Radical belonging is not an optional value of the church. It is the core to the gospel we proclaim. The apology was not an ending. It was a threshold. The work of healing, accountability, and transformation continues in our worship, our governance, our theology, and our daily lives. May we be a church that does not grow weary of learning, that acts with courage, and that lives into love with deeds as well as words. May Pride remind us of who we are called to be, a people mending what has been broken and rejoicing in the beautiful diversity of God's creation. Amen. Happy Pride.
The United Church of Canada has always been a place where faith leads to action. And over time, we have become more welcoming to all people. And we can all find our home right here. Whatever brought you into the United Church of Canada, we're glad you're here today. The United Church has been setting the table for 101 years, adding place settings for people who were not there before. Prairie farmers, prison families, queer communities. The question for us today, right here in Thorncliffe Park, or wherever you happen to live, is who still needs a place set for them? Who are we still learning to welcome? And that's not a rhetorical question. I want to present this like it's let's say, a birthday game. And perhaps the next person we welcome into our midst, we should think of as a birthday present. Happy birthday. Amen.